Hello, welcome to episode 42 of the Blindsided podcast. And it's a perfect lead in, the name of the podcast, to the topic and what we're talking about today. Because most of us have been blindsided in life, as in we just didn't see it coming. And I believe with the food industry and the foods that have been placed at right in front of us with great packaging, great messaging, great colors, and great facts on the front of it, that we said, wow, this looks great. And we were kind of blindsided into some habits of eating that didn't produce health. It produced, as I put in the fat, sick, tired, and wondering, geez, getting old really sucks. So, hi, I'm Charlie Collins with the Blindsided podcast. I'm a co-host here, and who's with me?
Hi, Charlie. It's me, Brenda. I'm here every week. Hi, everybody. My name is Brenda Hayden. I am an emotional awareness coach, and I'm the founder of Time for a 10 and co-host of this podcast. I also have a thriving YouTube channel with lots of great tips on it for psychology and metacognition and ways to challenge your conditioned thinking. And we have a guest today. Hi, Todd.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me on. And my name's Todd Angelucci. I'm a recovering human being. I'm a nurse by education. I have a podcast as well, and I've been into health and wellness, and I do a lot of coaching on people that just are feeling stuck. They feel like maybe they're a 2 or 3 on the inside, and they're pretending that they're an 8 or a 9, and life's kind of falling down a little bit, and they need to walk into and understand what's holding them back. And I use an assessment that helps them. And so, and I'm a 4-year brain tumor survivor. And I've done some deep dive into the brain, the body, and all that as a result, for sure.
Well, fantastic. We're glad to have you with us. So, I'm going to go to another slide here. And Brenda, if you don't mind just quickly reading.
I'm ready for it, Charlie.
We'll go through the 2 and then we'll jump right in. Here we go.
You want me to read the whole slide, Charlie?
Yeah, it's pretty quick, bullet points.
All right. So American health is getting destroyed. 18% of teens have fatty liver disease. That's a big number. 20 to 25% of women are on an antidepressant medication. Early onset dementia and Alzheimer's disease have tripled since 2013. American girls are starting puberty years earlier than they were in prior centuries and are starting earlier than any other continent in the world. Infertility is rising rapidly and unsustainably, with sperm counts declining 1% per year and infertility rates rising at 1% per year. The U.S. has the highest infant and maternal mortality rate, of all high-income countries, despite spending the most. Life expectancy is seeing a sustained decline in the United States, driven by COVID, chronic liver disease, heart disease, and suicide. And 77% of young Americans, I can't read the rest of that slide, Charlie, because our screen is covering it. So what is the 77% of young Americans statistic?
Cannot be drafted and cannot go into the Army or armed forces.
Oh my goodness, Charlie, I have no idea it was this bad.
Okay, one more. Don't worry, you did it really well.
All right, so American health is getting destroyed. 74% of American adults are dealing with overweight or obesity. Close to 40% of children have overweight or are overweight or obese. 52% of American adults have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. 30% of teens have prediabetes. This was 11% in 2002. 1 in 36 children are on the autism spectrum, up from 1 in 150 in the year 2000. The number is 1 in 22 in California. 34% of young adults have a mental, emotional, or behavioral disorder. Incidence of early onset cancers have increased by 79% in recent years. Nearly 1 in 2 Americans is predicted to get cancer in their lifetimes. That's a 41.6% chance. This is the first year America is estimated to have over, I think it's 3 million. Is that what it says?
Sorry, can't help you, but
It's all right. Yeah, I can't read 8 and 9, but I think we get the idea, Charlie.
yeah,
It's a mess.
It's very depressing.
It's a mess.
But, and that's just, I mean, it's not all exact food science is what's causing all this, but they're figuring out that that's what's going on. And I was saying blindsided. So I used blindsided, like not sighted, but sighted. That's kind of sounds the same. But like in my life, like when things happened, like, I don't know, man, it just happened. But when I got well and I started realizing taking responsibility is a good thing to do, I realized actually I wasn't blindsided. I was just sleeping at the wheel. And I don't, the food, it was a certain way. When my dad was little, they had little farm stands. People worked on the farm. People were outside all day, really, and then more people kept coming. And what happens? Well, Henry Ford's of the big food industry says, well, we got to make food faster and more enjoyable. So they went to work and, so we could produce more food. People got office jobs and started eating highly processed food. Why not? I mean, I remember there was a little bag of cookies. I don't know how many were in there. I didn't like it. It wasn't that heavy, but it said like only 150 calories for the whole bag. I'm like, sweet, I can eat 2 bags. And, that's when I thought it mattered, calories. I didn't understand. I was blindsided by the marketing. I believed it. I wasn't curious. I didn't say, well, what are the other health benefits in here? If I'm saving calories, what else? And I think that's what's happened. And we're really waking up to what's going on. I'm 50 something. I'm overweight. I don't have the energy I used to have. I'm, you know what I mean? And it's like, Todd, you and I met years ago, and both of us were not awake. We were definitely not. We did not know the truth about what we put in our body, how it fuels us, energizes us, and helps heal us. We were but boy, did we wake up and really start going at this.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's I think how we take care of ourselves, it kind of it says something about how we feel about ourselves, and one of the things I talk to people about a lot is that we're always, that there's some simple things we could do to help ourselves first. Like, I think we're riddled. You mentioned stuff about anxiety and depression and some of those things that you were reading. And the things about that is, if we could just help our diet a little bit, like there's a percentage of that depression and anxiety that can get reduced because our brains are inflamed. I'm not discounting anxiety and depression for people by any stretch, but what I'm saying is I remember when I started to get that inflammation out of my body, that stuff started to calm down and my brain felt a little clearer. I was like, oh my God. Like, and I think that's an awareness too. And I was unaware, and totally, for sure, I was unaware at one time, for sure.
You were talking, Charlie, and I was sitting here thinking, one of the biggest blocks to understanding this whole problem for me was I've never been overweight. I've always been really thin. I exercise. I try not to eat horrible foods. And then I got my blood work done, and I've gotten to be more mindful over time since I've had that blood work done. It was years ago that I got my blood work done, and I was pre-diabetic, and I had some fatty liver, showing up. And I'm like, well, how could that be when I'm thin and in shape? And it was because of this stuff that was in the food that I was eating. It was making me sick. And I thought it couldn't possibly happen to me because I'm in good shape and I'm thin. And I wonder how many people just think because they're not overweight or because they're athletic and they exercise and they go to the gym and they feel pretty good on a regular basis, that they're not even aware of the toxicity that's in their body that is just building up over time.
Yeah, our bodies are amazing, and it'll constantly, every time, it'll go to work trying to clean it. But eventually it says, all right, enough already. Now you're going to start feeling some, gout and pains throughout the body and back issues and posture issues. And I can't sleep that well. And the thing is that we're then told that's normal. We're not telling you it's our food that's doing it to you. You're just getting older. So we have stuff for that too. It's called Snicker bars and Red Bulls and Monsters and extra coffees and, certain pills. And don't worry, we got your back. We'll help guide you right into that little box.
You know what I want to throw into this mix too, Charlie, since we're going to have this in-depth conversation today on food and your body, is that, there's no money in cures. Our healthcare system is not designed to make us better. It's not designed that way. It's designed to treat the symptomology and keep us sick. There's money in that. There's no money in being well.
They're totally, I've been researching this more recently, and a lot has really hit the public eye, especially in result of, the political landscape. And I think there's been a lot, like I've listened to some work by Callie and Casey Means, and they presented to the government a lot of what's going on in our country that's leaving us sick. The tobacco companies had all these restrictions, and then they dumped all this false narrative into our food system and our food pyramid. And it's really interesting, not that I'm a huge Lucky Charms eater now, but when I was a kid, I sure did. But if you pull a box of Lucky Charms that's produced here in America and you compare it with Canada, they have like 10 ingredients there. Ours, we have like 40. And it was really interesting to start to learn that how easy it is for the system and these companies to bypass some of the regulations here in the country. And, I've changed my mindset a little bit in the last year after starting to hear this. It's like, I never want to have this victim mindset by any stretch. But there are some of these things that we feel is not our fault, right? Like there's plastics and all this stuff. And I was never really that much of a buyer into it until I just started seeing, because I work in healthcare, and I'm amazed at the amount of people I see at a younger age. I'm talking 40s, even 30s, but 40s and 50s. The incidence of people that have just gotten blindsided, gut punched with a cancer that just came out of nowhere. Like they've had this like belly pain, and you see the incidence of breast cancer is just unbelievable, colon cancer, and all of this stuff that's just hitting people, and it game changes their lives, and there's certain things we can control for sure, but it's been an eye opener for me as I work alongside, and even in my own journey with a brain tumor. Like I ate healthy, I was pretty okay, but out of nowhere, I just got gut punched. And I talked to the doctor. I'm like, I was talking to a neuro-oncologist, and I said, should there be a diet that I follow? And he's like, no, just eat whatever you want. But I'm like, no, that's not what I'm doing.
Doctors are the last people to ask about nutrition advice.
100%.
So, Todd, there's some, in my 40s or 50s, if I'm blindsided with cancer, well, was I eating healthy? Was I exercising? Was I meditating? Am I connected to the universe and a higher power? Because then your chances of all that, those statistics, you being one of them, is much less. And I know that I know now that the way I eat, the way I do, the way I live, can produce some real struggle in my life, or can allow me to live a life full of, purpose and and that to me, and again, I go back to Todd when we were, what was it, 2005 or so, and hey man, hey, what's up? No, we don't have much to talk. It's like we knew what we knew because we were told certain, like, Wonder Bread's great and all this stuff. And it told us it was gluten free. Well, not back then, but gluten free and low fat and good health, heart healthy and good for this and good for that. And because the lobbyists, and there's so much money involved, they can get their way and put that stuff on there. But I believed it, and until we said, wait a minute, this podcast, this platform is about metacognition. It's like, why am I thinking this? Why am I doing this? Is it serving me? And is it serving others? And it's like, I just started getting more and more curious. And we often talk about that app, Yucca, that you can scan a barcode and it says, if you eat this, you could either eat this or go out to your garage and drink some motor oil. It's your choice. It doesn't say that, but food, highly processed food has as much nutrient value as motor oil at times. And we eat it because it's yummy.
Yeah. It's let me say good morning, and then I want to comment on that. So I want to say good morning to Carrie and Cassidy and Trish. These guys are our regulars, so I want to give them a shout out. Carrie's reminding you, Charlie, that when you guys were little, the person next door worked for Hostess. And and Trish is saying Hostess equals illness and death. Remember Hostess? The Twinkies that never go bad? Like you can bring them, sit them on a counter. The nice thing about the Yucca app is not only will it tell you the hazardous, meaning likely cancer causing, ADHD causing, diabetes causing, not only will it tell you what the chemicals are in it, but it will give you links to the scientific papers, the studies behind it. And I was shocked when I started using that app with the amount of chemicals that were in our food. Like you talked about Wonder Bread, they call it enriched flour. They strip the nutrients out of the flour, right? And how do they do that? With a chemical, I'm assuming. I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming it's with a chemical. That can't possibly be good for us. And the other thing that infuriates me, I think it was Cowspiracy, or Netflix has some really good documentaries on food and how bad it is for you and all the lies that we've been told about food. But the World Health Organization some time ago categorized ground beef, right? Processed ground beef as carcinogenic. It's as carcinogenic as cigarettes, right? But that's what they're serving in Happy Meals. That's the beef that's being sent to all these fast food restaurants that kids who don't have a choice are eating. And I don't understand how that can be okay. I don't understand how that can be okay, because they don't serve that kind of food. You're right, in Canada or Europe, there's half the ingredients because it's illegal. It's illegal in other countries. I'm sorry, I'm shouting. I get so upset.
I love your passion about that, and Trish made a comment here that she returned from Europe. I had a client who went there for a little bit. She went to Italy and she struggled with food here. She struggled with a lot of problems. And she shared that she was eating there and the things that bothered her here didn't bother her there. She was able to eat pastas. She was able to eat certain things. And the level of inflammation and trigger in her body was much different. And it's just an eye-opening experience, because we think we live in this country, which I love this country. We think we live and we have all these things and things are more advanced here, but we start to question. And I think if we haven't learned in the last few years here that, what we think we knew, we didn't know. And that's the blindsided. Like, I think, one of the things, and to your point, you're emotional, you help people with emotional coaching, right? So everyone kind of falls, we have this emotional mismanagement. And sometimes it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? And sometimes I find that emotional mismanagement can be triggered by food, right? Like I have this problem and it's hilarious. So I eat pretty well, right? But there's a day I'm going to have a cheat day or something. And some of the people closest around me laugh at me, but if I have like a gluten or a bread, it kicks off this craving that is nuts, that there's this insatiable thing that I just can't stop. And it's like nuts. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm running to the store to get more bread. Like it's that insane. But I could feel it in my body. And I don't call it like, hey, I got this gluten allergy. I got a gluten sensitivity. And it starts to cause, I get rashes, my skin's a darn mess. But the insanity is like, hey, I'm going to try this again, maybe in a few weeks. Right. But, I think what the problem is there's a confused mind does nothing. And I think we live in this country, we live in a place too, where people are often like either they're on or they're off. There's no in between, you know what I mean? For sure. So, and I think making some steps and being, I'm going to use the term, just being compassionate with yourself and being curious and open to learning, leads to some small changes for people, for sure.
Yeah. I think there might be gluten in alcohol, because I had that same issue with that.
Me too, my friend.
It's funny how I'm like, I think I want more. No. Let me have some bread too. Yeah. And I think they named Wonder Bread because they were in the exec room and they're like, let's put this out to the market because we kind of wonder what it might do to people. Again, it goes back to where capitalism, Henry Ford said, let's make cars faster. And then they adopted that into food. Let's make food faster. Let's cut out and we'll just make it in a lab and we'll test it on people. They have scientists testing everything and they monitor the brain. And when it lights up like a Christmas tree and it, triggers the addiction area and okay, that's good. Do more of that. Why do you think Lay's says you can't eat just one? No sugar. Well, actually, there is sugar in that. And, so I just started learning like, oh, this thing is loaded with high corn fructose and sugar. There's like 62 or 142 different names for sugar. They keep creating new ones. And then it gets caught. And it's like, gosh, why would these companies do this? Why would they make Twinkies or Rolos? Or, I guess if you have a half a Twinkie a year, that's okay. But my neighbor did. He was the hostess guy, and I'd go over there and eat lots of them. And they were good. They were spongy and disgusting. Like, hey, how long has this been on the counter? Oh, 4 years. It's fine. And I think that this podcast too is about us taking charge of our lives, taking responsibility. If I'm feeling a little anxious, depressed, a little befogged, I walk into a room and I'm like, I don't really remember why I came in here. And it's been a half a second. I'm not sleeping that well. I may be getting a little more agitated throughout the day. I'm finding myself going to batter foods. Yeah, that's nice. But things to solve that problem instead of taking a step back. What's going on here? That's what I did. I would eat those like processed mix of stuff. It had pretzel and coated this and that, and that with a ham and cheese sandwich on a hard roll. I'd make it work. And I think I'm doing the right thing because I'm buying the things. So I'd have a big old sandwich with goop and I drank diet caffeine-free Coke. How could you get any better than that? And I believed it. And I would drink like 8 of them a day. They're not hurting me. Yes, they were. Because I only wanted to believe what was easy.
Mm.
This seems right. I'm going for it. I don't have time, nor did I know it was important to pull back the cover to, find who's behind the Wizard of Oz. Hey, dude.
Yeah. It's interesting, Charlie. I did a video some time ago. It's on my YouTube channel at Time for 10, and it's on addiction. And one of the things I talk about in that video very briefly is food addiction. And what happens is, and I want to talk about Todd's point to his cheat day, is, when naturally, instinctively, our instinctive brain, we get a dopamine hit when we eat food because that's how we survive, by eating. So our body is designed to give us a dopamine hit when we eat food. So the food scientists know this, and they create food that is going to trigger that dopamine in your brain. So you will have that craving and want more. And when you mix salt and sugar, that's what happens in the brain. The salt and the sugar together, the sodium and the sugar, kicks off a craving. And the more intense of sodium and sugar in the product, the more intense the craving is. So they caught on to this, and they've designed food in that way to make you want more, to kick off that natural system in your body that rewards you for eating. The second thing is, when I'm working with clients who have food addiction, one of the things that we work on is not assigning a reward emotionally. Don't assign a word to the food like a cheat day, right? So what I was saying to myself, because I was having, once a week on a Saturday night, I'll eat a pint of ice cream, Talenti or Ben and Jerry's, but it's once a week, right? And so all week long, I would say, well, I deserve that. I'm eating well all week, so I'm going to treat myself to that pint of ice cream. I'm not treating myself at all. It isn't a treat. It's a toxic waste dump that I'm putting in my body, and I'm telling myself it's a treat. So the first thing we work on is not associating any kind of reward with food, which as a culture, we tend to do that. We celebrate with food, and we don't look under the hood, what actually we're putting in our body. But instead of doing that, just look at food as sustenance. And don't assign meaning to it. Don't attach meaning to having a certain type of food as a reward.
Yeah, that's huge. I think the mental component around it is really key. There's a lot of emotional stuff around food. I think, we live in a society that, we have a lot of different challenges, but we also have a lot of resources if we're open to looking at it. Recently, I partnered with a functional medicine doctor. He's a urologist, and he still does surgery, but he's got his own practice where he helps people. And we actually did a podcast, and he really brought a lot of things to light that I wasn't really even aware of or really focused on, because I came from my own framework. Like I come from a place of like, hey, if there's a problem, let's fix it. Like if I'm on a diet, I'm following it, or I'm being mindful. But I never thought of other things that could potentially implicate and hold people back, because I just came from my own mindset. And what I mean by that was, I'm like, I would go to the beach in this past year, and if I saw like 5% of the people thin, that would be a miracle, right? Like it's honest. And I'm like, there's gotta be a bigger problem here. And it's not just the food I'm putting in my mouth. It's that and a bunch of other things that if we could just take some simple steps, then you could start to create some momentum and little wins that build upon each other. Because I think what happens is people get caught in a fad like it's either a fad diet or or I'm going to do this. And then when they fail a little bit, because we all fail, right? Then it becomes the baby's out with the bathwater. And I might as well just go back. And then you get into this cycle. And I work with people on this obligation cycle. And then you recommit, you feel bad about yourself, and you're kind of going in this loop. And nothing really changes unless a certain mindset and a few things are adapted. That's been my experience with it. And even in my own thinking, because there are tools that will help people get on the right track. And they may need some tools that I might not do myself, but I've seen some people say that they've gotten some value out of it. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. Wow. I know. It's like, why at a certain time is my body calling for something? My mind is doing something else. And then the robot gets up and I'm standing there looking in the pantry going, what am I looking for? And then I might say, well, let me just hang out here because it'll find me. And, that's so disconnected. It's like my body was calling for something. Hey, I need a little sugar. I need this. I need that because, I'm used to you doing this to me. And that's why waking up and saying, well, do I really need whatever I'm going for? No. Will I die if I don't eat it? No. Okay, so what can I do about this? Well, I can move a muscle, change of thought. I could do some jumping jacks. I could call someone. I could go stand outside in the sun and be grateful and come back in and disconnect from that habit. And I formed a lot of bad habits. And, Brenda, you say that reward, but also I ate and did things out of punishing. Like, I'm a loser.
Absolutely.
So let me eat all this ice cream and try to get some ease and comfort so I don't feel that way. And then I felt worse. I mean, not right away, but then the little guy in there would say, you're such an idiot. You said you weren't going to eat ice cream. And you did. You said you were going to get up early in the morning. You didn't. You said you were going to do this and you didn't. And I would be so hard. And it's like, how could I stick to that when I wasn't eating well? I wasn't I wasn't open to ideas. I was doing it my way and expecting, like you just said, Todd, I wanted to change, but I wasn't going to hire a coach because he might tell me something, hard.
Yeah. You talk about something important here, Charlie, and this blew my mind. So I take the train a lot, right? Because I go to school in the city, and on every stop, there's a billboard, right, that says feed the feeling. And it's an advertisement for pink sea salt popcorn. And I'm like, I cannot believe that there is actually advertising that is promoting feeding the feeling, because it's just what you're talking about. And guilty as charged myself. And I do those things today. I question, like, why am I eating this? Am I trying to self-soothe in some way? Right. And if I am, what am I trying to self-soothe? What is the discomfort that I'm trying to get rid of by putting the sugar in my body? But we've gotten very used to, as a society, of feeding the feeling.
Yeah, 100%. That is 100%. We feed. And I think what happens is we're in this overstimulated world. And I think there was some things that I didn't think of that now I have a lot of belief in. And, if we go back to the industry, if we go back to corporations, and I learned this when I listened to a pretty cool podcast with Callie and Casey Means. I talked to the physician that I am friends with, and he brought up some things that I would have never thought, and my own preconceptions and prejudice kept me from it. And it's really interesting. If you start to study the health and wellness industry, they're starting to talk a lot for both females and males, the impacts over time in our society of all this stuff on our hormones. And, here's another duped thing that we thought, right? So there was a lot of issues with women taking, hormone replacement therapy, right? Because they said it caused cancer. And now the data, they're coming out that data was really flawed. It was really flawed data. And now there's some physicians that are stepping out and above to really help them. And the thing too with males, even at the young age of 30, if you're into 40, looking at your testosterone, but also looking at free testosterone and some other important markers. And this stuff's a game changer in people's lives, that they attribute it to their own mental status, but this affects your mental status. And sometimes just little tools to help us, because don't forget, all of this hormones that are pumped into our food, they're talking about plastics in our environment. These are all huge hormone disruptors. And we could go sidebar on a total thing. And this physician brought this up to me and I never thought of it this way. Like, look at the males. We have what we call beta males now. Is this a result of them having decreased hormones as they're growing up? And there's a lot talking about, what they've done with puberty blockers, all this stuff. Young girls now are hitting puberty earlier, and all of this stuff that we don't think about is part of our pillars of health that we need to look for. We need to look at the basics. What are we eating? Are you staying away from bags and barcodes? You know what I mean? Are we doing some mindfulness, right? Like, people now, like, some real function. Is it mindfulness? Are we able to slow our mind down? Do we have a routine? Are we talking about sleep, right? And are we talking about the stressors in our life which cause that? Because that was the thing for my brain tumor. Like, that was the one thing that was revealed to me. Like, I ate well, I worked out well, and I'm like, but my emotional mismanagement, I had unresolved and unprocessed trauma that I didn't look at, because I was living my life like I had my foot on the gas and the brake at the same time. And I didn't need to. It was all fantasy. I live on a lake. I have a beautiful place. I have a house. I have a lot of great things, right? But in my mind, I was like, I'm going to live in a box tomorrow. I better get out there. And I think that one of the things that we're not looking at and starting to walk along with us, because this all plays into how our mind is working, and then it causes us to eat and stuff this stuff down. I know I kind of went on the side rail, but there's so much stuff that if we don't think about, that impacts our world and all these things. And people are resistant to trying things. And even this physician said, everyone's pushing GLP-1s, right? Everyone's talking about it, right? They're starting to give it to people. But there are some benefits to somebody that may be having a hard time getting started. If they're used correctly, if they're just used as a little tool to get somebody going, in combination with maybe their hormones are off, it starts the treadmill where they could start to pull that down, eat better, and puts them in a position so they're supported and they're not constantly feeling depleted. I never thought that way until, honestly, probably 6 months ago, because I'm the guy that, hey, tell me what to eat and I'll eat it and I'll do it. And I have to do hard things and I have to push through. And that's how I do things. And that's okay. It works for me. Sometimes it doesn't, but it works for me. But I need to understand that not everybody thinks that way. And some people need different levels of support. And I always encourage people to just explore and be informed, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's funny. It took you a long time to find out not everybody thinks like you.
Only 6 months ago, man. I'm only kidding.
It's just in that area, because I remember thinking, when somebody's like, dude, people don't process and come up with and think the way you think. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with them? I mean, I really was that blind. I didn't know. And I learned it in my store, trying to help a customer with the same eye disease as me. Here is what you need, period. And she's saying, no, this doesn't work. I'm like, what is wrong with you, lady? It works for me. It has to work for you because I decided that for you. And, but I showed her, she said, well, the tools that work for you might not work for me because maybe I approach things differently than you. And I'm going, you're an old lady, shut up. And wow, did she teach me a lesson? It isn't, it's, I can, then I said, oh, okay, well, here's some other things. And she found things that helped her. And it's like that with everything. It's like my way or the highway is not the best program of action to talk down to people. And I just want to say, well, ask Brenda, who do I have on the screen? Name thingy.
So I'm going to read the comments in a minute too. Carrie, Trish, Kate. Oh, Pathway to Purpose. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about who's in the chat.
No, that's okay. I knew you'd come around eventually.
Yes, Blindsided podcast.
All right. So I just want to mention that the slides you read, those are from Dr. Casey Means' newsletter, Todd, that you referenced, because she's putting herself out there, and she's doing something about this pandemic of illness and food.
Yeah, and if people are interested in learning more about it, Joe Rogan did an amazing interview with them, which I thought was really powerful. And you could always look it up under the Joe Rogan show. He definitely had the conversation there was great. And it just opens our eyes to different things that we've never thought of, because we just come from our own frame. And that, me too. Like, I was, there's things that I didn't necessarily believe in, but when I opened my mind and explored them, I think the medical model is at the verge, especially with them at the forefront of making some shifts, because the medical model has challenges, and there's some doctors that are starting to step up and starting to step out of things. And it's important to do your own research. When I was first diagnosed, I put it out on Facebook, and I must have had hundreds of people telling me what I should do, right? And they're like, oh, you should go vegan. You should do this. You should eat keto. Like, there's so many things that people say. And like I said, a confused mind does nothing. And there's good and bad and everything. So I listened to some experts who I thought were experts. And when a lot of their thought processes started to overlap and have similarities, I'm like, wow, then that makes sense. Like, there's some common sense approaches to things. You know what I mean? And, I share what works for me, but what doesn't work for me may not, what works for me may not work for somebody else. But I think the step in making small shifts and starting to celebrate the wins, and even the little shift, like, if you eat a bad carb in the morning, it doesn't mean you need to eat a bad carb in the afternoon. You made a better choice. And to be curious and open. I think a lot of people, and this has been my experience, and if people, no matter how old you are, if you could have the idea that you're going to learn, that you're a learning person, rather than you think you should know it, or if I don't know it, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. All these stories that we tell ourselves start to become a narrative that keeps us stuck.
That's great. So before we wrap up, because we're getting close to the end here, there's a couple of tips here. First, I want to share that Kate says she's been eating clean for a month, absolutely no processed food, and she feels so much better. And then we got some great advice from Carrie. She says, if you can't pronounce the ingredient in the food, then it's fair to assume it's not very good for you. That's great advice. Simple advice, but true. This has been a great podcast, you guys. I've learned a lot. And, start small, be gentle and kind with yourself, like Todd said, and just move forward. Reach out to one of us if you're curious. Curiosity is the best way to change. It's just to be curious and non-judgmental. So I love that. This has been great. Anything you want to say? Go ahead, Charlie.
I said, isn't that what killed the cat?
Nope. It isn't. It's a lie. That's a lie.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
again,
a game changer.
Sure. I want to just put it, because we talk, anxiety, depression, that those waves of self-pity, depression, things like that. I in my life, really, my fear was crippling and all that. And yeah, I removed certain substances that really had consequences, but the hidden consequences of bad foods takes a long time until boom, it's staring you right in the face. And you could have creaky parts and sore this and inflammation, and you can go to a doctor and they're going to do the doctor thing. They're not going to say, all right, you got all this. So what did, how many hours of sleep did you get last night? How much water did you drink? What type of food are you eating? Do you meditate in the morning? They're not going to ask that stuff. They're going to open their book of pills, and that's just what they know. So I love this, that we don't believe what you think, but think what you believe. And if your beliefs aren't serving you, get some new ones, because that's how, that's what we can do. Because Todd, since you and I started hanging out and getting to know each other, we're completely different people. And like you said, I'm a teacher, but I'm always a student, because in our book, it says we won't tire as easily anymore. And I have found that to be the case, especially if I'm on a pathway to purpose.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, and that the birth of, I changed my podcast name to Pathway to Purpose. And the one thing that I've learned is, like, our biggest challenges, our biggest things that we think that have occurred in our life, and the biggest things we face are our biggest growth opportunities and our biggest teachers, if you're open and curious. Now, the worst, you could turn the most negative situation around by just being curious. Like, what's this here to teach me? Like,
Exactly.
what's this really mean? And just start asking these powerful questions, and that starts to unlock it. What happens is we often run from our pain. We're often numbing it with food and drugs, alcohol, coffee, whatever. And instead of looking at it and embracing it, and then stepping alongside a person who may be experiencing something different, it gives us that level of compassion, which then gives us compassion for ourselves.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
And don't forget, I think I'm playing the like, subscribe, tell.
You are, Charlie.
Look at this. Come on. Help us build
You
it.
are.
Whoa.
This is fancy, man.
Yeah, it is.
That's how I rolled, Angelucci.
I love this. I love this. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah,
No, it was great. It was
And
great.
people want to get in touch with you, Todd. How do they find you?
Well, they can find me at toddangelucci.com. That's my website. I'm on all the socials as well. I spend a bunch of time there. And I have a podcast. It's Pathway to Purpose. And it's just really it's been evolving and growing in a lot of different ways. So
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And of course, Time for 10 and Blindsided Productions is where you would find me, or next Saturday. Is that? Yeah, we'll be here. And Todd, you said, this situation, I want to end with this, take this. We all have adversity, but in adversity, there's always a university. When we ask the right questions, it's a whole type of learning process, schooling that will come out much greater than the adversity. And also in adversity is a verse. If you ask the right questions, the power will bring you to a solution. As long as you're not eating a Twinkie.
And don't hate yourself after you eat it either.
No. That's a waste of time.
That
Do
is
that
a
to
waste
yourself.
of time.
Hate the people that created it.
Don't
All
feed your feelings. Don't feed your feelings.
All right. I won't. Darn it. I was going to go have some yummy food. No, I'm just kidding. See you guys. Thank you kindly.